Dr. Jelena Vulevic is a gut microbiologist, CEO and co-founder of the biotechnology company veMico, and founder of A Gut Perspective. She is known for translating gut science into meaningful, real-world health insights without relying on quick fixes or wellness hype. Dr. Vulevic, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting me. Really, it's my pleasure to talk to you today.
So let's start from the beginning. We hear the term gut health everywhere today. From a scientific perspective, what exactly is the gut microbiota?
Gut microbiota is a fascinating and huge community of microscopic organisms that live in our digestive system. Most of those guys are bacteria, but we also have viruses, fungi, and other microbes. And all together they form a very complex ecosystem that interacts constantly with our body. But these microbes are not just passengers. They help break down parts of the food that we can't digest ourselves. They produce many molecules that our body can use and interact with the immune system. I think one of the most fascinating things about them is that there are no two people on this planet that carry the same microbiota composition. We're all unique, like our fingerprints, and that variability and uniqueness means that even two healthy people can have significantly different microbiota, and that presents a real challenge to scientists who are trying to define what healthy or perfect gut microbiota composition looks like. So I think it's helpful to think that microbiota is an ecosystem that lives alongside us and is constantly communicating with our body.
So you've written that the microbiota is with us, but not actually us. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, that phrase is meant to highlight a very, very important distinction. These microbes live with us and influence our biology or physiology, if you like, but they're still separate from our own body. So biologically speaking, they are not really inside the body in the same way that our cells or our tissues and organs are, but also technically, they are also separate because all those substances, be microbial or dietary or whatever, are always outside until they cross intestinal barrier. I think maybe the simple way to think about it is like the guests in a house. So the guests can influence the atmosphere, they can make the place lively, or they can be really challenging and create the chaos. But ultimately, it is still your house and you set the rules. So in the same way, microbes influence our biology, but our body ultimately decides what to do with those signals. And that's why I say they live with us, but are not actually us.
Yeah, that's very interesting and not so common to hear that point of view. So the phrase gut health has become extremely popular in the wellness world, mostly, but you've argued that it's often misunderstood. So what exactly we tend to get wrong about gut microbiota?
Well, I think one of the biggest misunderstandings is that gut health has become almost entirely focused on microbes. In fact, gut health has become synonymous with the microbiome. We often hear that if we take a certain probiotic, for example, or if we eat the right fibers, or if we can reset the microbiome, then gut health will improve. But the biology is way more complex than that. That's not how things work, because the gut is not just some container where bacteria and the microbes live. It's actually a very active, extremely active, the most active organ in our body that is deeply connected with our immune system, metabolism, and nervous system. So microbes are part of this environment inside the gut. And as I said already, they're not really inside our body. And the one thing that I forgot to mention, which may make it clear for people, is that the only time when microbes cross inside our body is not a good time. Sepsis is one example of that. So they're never really inside. So they are environment in the gut, but so is the diet, stress, sleep, hormones, all of those things are present there. And all of them influence how our body interacts with those microbes. So symptoms, for example, such as bloating, fatigue, brain fog, food sensitivity, and so on, they're not simply a question of which microbe is present or what diet you're eating. They depend on how your body responds to all of those individual and combined factors. And that is why the same diet or the same supplement can work in one individual and have absolutely no effect, or even worse, have a negative effect in another, because the body's internal environment of each one of us is different.
So when it comes to, especially lately in many social medias, many programs actually promise to fix or to heal the gut in few weeks. Why that idea is scientifically problematic?
Well, the idea that the gut can be fixed quickly assumes that the gut is a simple system with one single problem. But the gut as I said already, extremely complex system, and it's also a part of a much bigger biological network in the body. The immune system, which predominantly sits there, the neuroenteric system, and so on. And the gut responds not just to a diet or microbes, probiotics, for example, but as I said already, it also responds to stress, sleep, hormones, diet, your genes, immune activity. It's connected to your age, sex, and so many different factors. And these influences build over time. They are not static. They start building when we're born, and then they continue until the moment that we develop a problem. So gut function cannot change drastically overnight. It needs to change gradually. And so when we see those promises that the gut can be healed in a week or 2 weeks or whatever, what those promises are doing is ignoring that complexity. So a more realistic goal is always to try to support this overall system and to make it stable and more resilient over time. So in other words, to increase the capacity, which is by far the most overlooked aspect of gut health.
There is one idea that you emphasizes, and that is the difference between influence and control. Is the microbiome really controlling our health, or is the host, which is our own body, actually in charge?
Well, the microbiome definitely influences our biology, and quite significantly, and so does the diet and the rest of the lifestyle. Microbes produce, as I said already, very many molecules that interact with the immune system. That's one of the main connections and the main ways in which they can influence our body. They can also affect the metabolism, and they can even produce the signals that reach the brain. So they are very, very active participants in our physiology. However, the influence is not the same as control. So our body decides how these microbial signals are interpreted. Our immune system, hormones that sit in the gut, our nervous system, all shape how we respond to any one of those microbial factors, as indeed how we respond to the rest of the lifestyle. So I think it's more accurate to think of the microbiome and the body as being in a constant communication. And microbes send signals. They are extremely important influencers, but the decision maker is actually our body.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going back to something that you already mentioned at the beginning. Why the same bacteria actually might be beneficial for one person, but not for another.
So I did say already that the effect of microbes depends on the environment of your body and not someone else's body. So your lifestyle, your genes, your age, sex, and everything else. I think maybe the simple way of trying to explain that is using an image of seeds in the soil. So the same seed can grow beautifully in one garden and really struggle in another because the soil conditions are not right or the soil conditions are different in that other garden. So microbes behave in a very similar way. Their effect depends on the environment they encounter in your body, my body, and everybody else's body. So, and that environment is shaped by so many things like diet, especially stress, hormones, immune activity, and so on. I keep repeating myself. So if the body is balanced, if all of those different components are balanced, then microbial signals can support healthy metabolism, for example, or a healthy immune function. But if those systems are under stress, for whatever reason, then the same microbes will produce or can produce different effects. So microbes are important, but their effects always depend on the host context. And that's why the same microbe can produce a very different effect in different individuals.
Yeah. You actually often highlight the importance of gut barrier. Many people don't know what that means. So what exactly is gut barrier and why it is so important to understand gut health?
So the gut barrier is that intestinal lining I mentioned at the beginning. When things cross that intestinal lining, they actually enter the body. So it is a defense mechanism, but it is also an interface between the inside of the body and the outside world. So it's incredibly important. It's incredibly complex system, and everything we eat, breathe, everything our microbes produce sits in the gut before it crosses that barrier. Maybe a useful way to imagine it is like a border control, decides what goes in, what stays out, and why. So it is made of very, very specialized immune cells. It has a mucus layer that's another kind of form of protection. And it also has immune components that regulate what is allowed to go through and how it's distributed throughout the body. So when this barrier works well, when everything is functioning well, then the communication between the microbes or between the outside world, be it the lifestyle, stress, diet, and so on, and the rest of the body stays balanced. But when the barrier becomes disrupted, and there are very many reasons why and when that happens, even during a normal process of aging, then the immune system becomes more reactive to everything that's going on, and the inflammation increases. So gut health is really about how the body regulates this interaction. And the key in there is that gut barrier, that border control, that really, because everything starts from there.
So just to be sure, the real question is not about actually which microbes are present, but it's more about how the body responds to them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The two people might have very similar microbes or eat the same diet, but their bodies may react differently. And the main reason for that is the integrity of this gut barrier, the communication with the immune system. When that's all working well, then everything is fine. When it's not, we start seeing problems.
Let's just go a little bit to the women's health specifically. And I would like to ask you, how do hormones influence how the body interacts with microbes, is there a difference actually between how the female body reacts regarding the male body?
Yes, hormones play an incredibly important role in overall gut physiology, and actually in many aspects of gut physiology. It's a very, very complex subject, and there are huge differences between males and females. But concentrating on the females and the women's health, as you mentioned. So estrogen and progesterone, they regulate immune or influence immune regulation, metabolism, and also how quickly the food moves along the gastrointestinal tract. So that's called motility. Because of this, hormonal changes affect how the body responds to microbial, dietary, and other lifestyle signals. They also influence quite dramatically the integrity of that gut barrier that I have mentioned. So going back to my example of a border control, the hormones, progesterone, yeah, and estrogen, sorry, are the main hormones that decide how strict or how relaxed that border control is. Estrogen is extremely interesting because it plays a very important role in regulating that integrity and how we react in terms of our immune response. So when estrogen levels are stable, then the barrier in a way is stronger, and the communication between the gut and the rest of the body, brain, metabolism, this and that, is better. But when estrogen levels drop, then the regulation changes. So during menopause, for example, or in perimenopause, especially menopause, when the estrogen levels drop significantly, what happens then is that gut barrier becomes more permeable. When the barrier is more permeable, letting through all kinds of things that it should and shouldn't, that affects the immune system. It becomes more exposed, it starts overreacting, the inflammatory signals go up. So that doesn't mean necessarily that there's something wrong with your microbiota. Often it actually reflects a change in how the body is regulating that interaction between the gut and the immune system. And that also partly explains why we see an increase in inflammatory conditions in women when they after the menopause. So again, it highlights a very important point. Gut health is not just about the microbes. It is about how the body manages this relationship with the entire gut environment, and hormones play an incredibly important part of that regulation.
Yeah, that's a whole subject apart, actually, that we could make talk of. So basically, these changes in gut function or microbiome actually are quite different if you're talking about that even during the pregnancy, comparing to perimenopause or menopause.
Yes, I mean, women. I don't want to say that we're unfortunate, but the function of our entire body and gut specifically is tied to hormones. So from puberty to death, we are affected by it. And I don't know any women who have not ever experienced any digestive problems during some stage, whether it's a pregnancy or a menstrual cycle and so on. We know that pregnancy involves major shifts in metabolism and immune regulation, which influence the gut function, motility, and everything else. Menopause and perimenopause, there are huge fluctuations that affect inflammation, metabolism, and the response to stress. And many women report that it is during that time, perimenopause specifically, or later in menopause, that the digestive symptoms appear for the first time in their lives, or they become much worse during that time, even though they have not changed anything in their lifestyle or diet. And in many cases, that reflects those changes in how our body is regulating a gut function rather than simply changes in the microbiome itself. So when we look at gut health in women, it is essential to look at the biological context and life stage. It's even more difficult to give generalized advice to women than it is to men because of those hormones. Because the hormones, immune regulation, metabolism, nervous system, microbes, they all interact with the gut environment at the same time.
Yeah, so it's not just my impression, but I always thought that women generally are suffering more from digestive problems than men.
Yes, it is true, and it is primarily driven by hormones. And also one thing that I didn't mention, what happens during this, and it predominantly linked to estrogen levels. What happens during those stages is also that the sensitivity in the gut increases. So suddenly we become we can't tolerate, or we become less sensitive to foods as well as everything that our microbes are producing. Now, that doesn't mean that those foods or the microbes are wrong. It just means that those hormones, estrogen dominantly, is affecting the physiology in such a way so it's making everything bigger and different to what it normally is. And that's why we often see those gastrointestinal symptoms related to those life stages.
So, given all this complexity, if someone wants to support gut health for a long term, where they should start, when they should start, I guess, from the beginning, from the first day, but how they can support it for a long term.
The question when they should start is a difficult one to answer because we should all start at birth. And then depending on how well we have done during those early years, puberty and so on, those things change. So that's a very complex question. Will have a complex answer. But the other part of your question was what are
what they can do to support it.
So I think the most consistent evidence shows that gut health overall is supported by lifestyle patterns rather than a single intervention. So varied diet with plenty of plant foods provides nutrients and fibers for microbes, but also for our body. Regular physical activity is important because it helps the metabolism, that gut motility and everything else. Good sleep and stress management are essential. Without that, very little can happen or change. And so all these factors support the microbiota, but they also support our overall body. So it's the story you've heard and everyone has heard before. There are no magic pills that you can take and suddenly transform everything. The one thing that's important to remember is that all those things that I've mentioned and the things that people have heard before really only work if you are healthy and have already balanced lifestyle. Because if you have problems or a disease or something that you carry from early life that affects gut health, well then trying to come up with the generalized advice for those people is not possible because they then have to really work with specialists who can understand that capacity of their gut and where they are today and incorporate everything that happened before in order to come up with a workable protocol or something that can work for them. Another important point is the thing I mentioned already. Gut health develops over time. So the goal is not constant optimization or changing the latest supplement or a diet trend. That does not work. And in fact, just managing the symptoms is not the sign that your gut is healthy. I mean, you can have no symptoms and really a bad gut health and vice versa. So, supporting the system that becomes adaptable and resilient is the goal. That has to be the goal. So, no chasing the quick fixes. That really never works in the long term.
I have one question because you were also one of the speakers on one of my conferences last year, and you said something very interesting that after 60, gut is already kind of, we did the work, no? So I would just like to know, is it for somebody who didn't take care so much until that period, is there still any chance to make it better? Or the work is done, really?
Yes, well, let's not make such rigid put such rigid fences. It is true that over 60 and 60 is not a number that applies to everyone because to some people 60 is in their 40s, to other people 60 is in their 70s. But generally speaking, when we get to over 60 or over 65, the aim is to manage and maintain what we have already achieved. It is very difficult at that age to make huge changes. That does not mean that, oh, well, we should not do it because it's never too late to start eating healthy and balanced diet and incorporate some physical activity or manage the stress, have a good sleep. And even at that age, you can still maximize the protection of whatever you have achieved until then, even in the worst possible cases. So, yeah, it is never too late, but we need to be aware of the expectations and manage our expectations. We can't suddenly become 20-year-olds when we're 65. I think that's definitely not possible.
Okay, I have another question about the latest trends and about probiotics and all the testing that we are doing, and that there is a lot of talk about the different, I think, how somebody can even know what kind of testing is really good testing and what kind of probiotics we should take, because they don't work all the same. There are even talks that I heard that it's if it's taken in powder, it has stronger effect than if it's in the pill. I mean, how somebody who doesn't know so much about that should go toward that, how much of probiotic they should really use in life and how much of effects they give.
It's it's a really, really difficult question to give a generalized answer because there are very many probiotics out there that have shown not just the promise, but that have incredible scientific evidence behind them. But which one is going to work for which person is $1 million question. There is no answer to that. And I really feel it with people who don't have that much knowledge and are trying to navigate through this field because it is incredibly difficult, incredibly complex. Um, as a rule of thumb, probiotics labeling is very important because the problem we have today in this world is that we have tens of thousands of different products, of which over 90% don't really have even what says on the packet, let alone that it delivers the benefit that they're claiming it does. So I guess if you want to try probiotics, you're going to have to do a bit of research. A probiotic needs to have two names. So, for example, Lactobacillus plantarum, that's a genus and a species, but it also then needs to have something else, some numbers or some letters or something. That is the identity of the strain, and that is the most important thing you need to understand what that probiotic does. So then you have to do some research and find out what the evidence is and give it a try. If it doesn't work in a month or a couple of months, you always have to give it some time, then it's not for you. The good thing about probiotics is that unless you are severely immunocompromised, they will not do you any harm.
Okay.
So taking them even if they don't have any benefit, won't do you any harm in vast majority of people. But deciding which one might work for you is a question I can't answer and give a generalized answer better than what I have already told you. Now, if the question was, does everybody need probiotics? Absolutely not. We get probiotics from foods, fermented foods, we'll have them. Yogurts, for example, most people will eat some kind of fermented food, some more than the others. We all have probiotics inside our guts. Those are the good bacteria that live with us our entire life. So a really good approach is to try and support those guys with appropriate dietary substrates, foods, even some supplements or other lifestyle strategies. So it is not necessary, I don't think, to take a probiotic. I don't know if I have answered. What else you have asked me? I forgot.
Yes. What do you think about microbiome testing today?
Oh, so so the microbiome testing. So the misconception with the microbiome testing is that one can do a microbiome test and then somebody can tell you what you should do and what you should eat. Well, the science is not really there. It is still evolving in that field, and that whole idea of interpreting the results is really not that straightforward. And if you take on board anything that I've said so far, it becomes extremely difficult. And in fact, just with the microbiome testing, you can tell very little or nothing about that interaction with the gut barrier, with the rest of the human body that I talked about. So I would not suggest that somebody does microbiome testing in order to find out what they should eat. It is not necessary. We should all eat healthy. So yes, I'm not a big fan. I think it's more marketing than science today. It may improve at some point in the future, but I think that's where we stand today.
Okay, and for the end, the free takeaway you could give as an advice when it comes to gut health somehow?
I'd like people to understand that gut health is definitely not just about the microbes. They matter, they are important, but they are influencers, not decision makers. And I think maybe if people try and understand that, then the gut health itself will become a little bit less confusing.
Thank you very much. We came to the end of our session of our podcast, Science in a Cup of Tea. And I would like to thank Dr. Jelena Vulevic for her time and for her explaining such a complex science behind gut health. I'm sure this was just the beginning. We could go much more, but we came to the end. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having me. It really was my pleasure. And thank you all for listening. Bye-bye.